Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Friday, January 15th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 230 days, the game against Michigan in 316 days. We are wrapping up National Championship Week with one final look back at what went wrong for the Buckeyes and what it could mean for the team this fall. My guest is Buckeye Scoop's X's and O's guru, Ross Fulton. Ross, before the game, you were suggesting they play more nickel and worry about stopping the pass, not the run. It sure didn't seem like they listened.
No, and I probably felt that that was going to fall on deaf ears. I was not the only one saying that. I think you could find a lot of people on Twitter that are interested in X's and O's making similar suggestions for Ohio State, but it hasn't been their MO, and it's been a point that I've harped on a lot, not even just this year, but last year. And it's something, even within the scheme they're running, you can emphasize different things, and you could certainly, I think, be less so monomaniacally obsessed with stopping the run at all costs and focus a little bit more on the passing game because, the more advanced statistics come into football, the more explosive pass plays are what really hurt you as a defense. So I think, big picture wise, that's going to have to be something that they're going to have to reassess.
Yeah, and I mean, to their credit, they did stop the run, and Najee Harris, you wrote an article about this on Thursday at BuckeyeScoop.com, and it had that great Najee Harris quote in there about how they absolutely beat the heck out of him in the run game, and nothing was easy. And so, okay, check mark there. Okay, and thus endeth the good news. So then DaVonta Smith has 215 yards receiving in the first half and 3 touchdowns. So that seems like a problem. So why not play more nickel? Did they not? I mean, I know they had an extremely good linebacker core this year. Was this just get the best players on the field? Did they not trust the personnel in the nickel package? Like, why would they not have gone to nickel more?
Yeah, these are great questions. I mean, I think some of all the above. And so I think we'd have to, it obviously would help to be a fly on the wall. But in terms of this scheme that they've been using, and it's the same scheme for the last 2 years. I mean, whenever Ryan Day's asked about it, it's frequently, but he's like pretty adamant, like what kind of defense he wants to see. Like, he'll list off that he wants to stop the run and limit big pass plays. And ironically, they pretty much did that against Alabama. I mean, obviously that DaVonta Smith over Tuf Borland exception, and then there was the Harris throwback. But they did really force Alabama to drive down the field. They did pretty much, as you said, make it at least difficult for Najee Harris, and yet Alabama just did it. I mean, they put together 12-play drives because they were throwing 8-yard slant out passes like it was 7-on-7, without anyone defending them. And so there's a philosophy issue there. There's also, as you said, it's not unreasonable as a coaching staff to want to put your best players on the field. You've made it this far playing, those linebackers have played a lot of snaps versus the nickel of the last 3 games has been Latham Ransom, a true freshman. So, it is a big leap to then all of a sudden turn around and suddenly decide we're going to play in the biggest game, our nickel, true freshman, 50 snaps, which is maybe more than he's played all season. Now, I think the retort to that is like, well, you should have been prepared knowing this was coming down the pipe. And it's one thing to like beat up on the Michigan States of the world and you can stop the run and they're not going to be able to throw the football. But you need to, in the off season, build having the nickel and more of a hybrid mindset in a more diverse pass defense in mind, so that you don't end up in this situation where you're trying to fix things on the fly.
So can you explain a little bit about what they were doing and why Alabama was able to take advantage of it? Because it was like they played a bunch in a system where you had a great clip from Steve Sarkisian talking at a coaching clinic about here's why this offense is able to absolutely chew up what Ohio State's about to run against us. And that seemed like that's probably I think he knows what's coming, and I think it's not going to go well for Ohio State. So can you explain what they were doing and why Alabama was able to take advantage of it so easily?
Yeah, I think in my preview article, I called it an interesting matchup with Alabama's RPOs versus Ohio State's cover 3, which is my euphemism for it. But so to take a step back, right? So we say single high safety. What we're really referring to is coverages where there is a deep safety in the middle of the field. And so the 2 principal ones are cover 1 man, where you have everyone, 5 wide receivers are covered in man coverage, and then you have a deep safety. Or cover 3, which again, you have the middle of the field safety playing a third and the 2 deep corners playing a third. What they do at Ohio State works best if pre-snap the offense does not know whether they're going to be facing cover one or cover three, despite having that safety in the middle of the field. So they're guessing. And then against RPOs, really, as Sark talks about in that clinic, what Alabama usually sees is cover one man, because, run pass options take advantage of like a linebacker being in run pass conflict. So like those, all those slants they throw, that's because your, weak hook linebacker like Pete Werner, let's say, sees the run action. He has a gap he has to defend, but he also is responsible for that weak hook zone. So if he's going to keep up, and which is this what Najee Harris said, the linebackers kept shooting up to the gaps and they just kept playing pitch and catch. And so in theory, I think if the 2019 Ohio State team had played Alabama, they would have just played cover one all game. That takes away the RPOs. It doesn't make it, it's not like an easy game or anything, but it at least takes away just playing this pitch and catch. The problem which Ohio State's coaches knew going into the game, because they couldn't play cover one against Rutgers and Indiana, let alone Alabama, is that they don't have the personnel to do it this year. So in their system, when you basically play two coverages, cover one and cover three, and you can't play one of them, you're left playing cover three. And so, I speculate that they're like, well, the least we can do is we'll at least stop the run, and that's something. And, we'll take our chances. And, this gets into a game dynamics, but maybe if Ohio State has Trey Sermon and they're able to run the ball a bunch and control some more of the clock, then you're in a 40-something to 40-something game, and that's your shot. Because otherwise, like they just had no chance with what they're doing on pass defense. And I will say they did try other things. Like they did try to play cover one, and Sean Wade would get burned. They played some cover two, and they couldn't stop the run, or they still couldn't play pass defense. So it wasn't like they just totally pounded their head against the wall. But obviously the nickel is a big glaring issue.
You mentioned the Tuf Borland play earlier, and poor Tuf Borland in the last game, probably of his Ohio State career, is the guy who's just the poster child of how bad this game was for the Ohio State defense. And that one, let people know, like, poor Tuf Borland, that one was not at all on him. Like what happened on that play that gets Tuf Borland matched up with DaVonta Smith, and there's no one else out there.
Yeah, and I on Twitter, especially like during games, I like to follow like coaches and X and O's people, and no one's like laughing at Tuf Borland. All those coaches are laughing at the Ohio State coaching staff for leaving Tuf Borland in that position. And so, there's this like coaching saying 3 up is 3, and what they're basically saying is that Ohio State's in their base cover 3, and they put DaVonta Smith as the inside trips receiver, and Borland is the weak hook player, and like his job is to carry him down the field. And like, you can draw that up, but when you have Tuf Borland running against DaVonta Smith, it looks pretty silly. And so, even I like to say that this is like a Pete Carroll based defensive system. Even like Pete Carroll acolytes, if you will, were like, you got to check out of what you're doing there. Like, yes, in theory, Marcus Williamson was the deep safety and he could have come over to help, but like, you got to roll your coverage the other way. So you have a safety on DaVonta Smith, or check to some kind of 2 deep safety look, because you're kind of just like setting yourself on fire by doing that.
And one of the things that Alabama offense does, the RPO looks that they were showing most of the game, it explained how that kind of puts Ohio State's defense in a no-win situation. Like, there's a certain way that if they're executing that well, like no matter what Ohio State's doing, they're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier with the cover 3 example. So, the benefit of playing these single high safety coverages is that like each defender is responsible for one run gap. And so, but then again, so like, Pete Werner has the backside A gap as the will linebacker, but he also in cover 3 is responsible for what I call the weak hook zone. So like basically where a slant pass is thrown, for lack of a better description. And then simultaneously the corner has a deep third. So the corner's going to bail. Pete Werner's going to come up to play the run. And so it's just an easy throw. There's literally no way to stop it other than if Pete Werner sits back, and then they can run the football. So that's why if you're in cover 1, at least the corner's up playing man coverage, and it gives you a better chance.
Now, Ryan Day talked after the game about the fact that they didn't want to get away from doing what they do. And, that's, as you said, they did try other stuff. It wasn't just they did one thing and that was it and it never changed. But, this is something, he is an offensive guy, plays this defense because this is the defense he doesn't want to see. The one high look and all that. So if they want to continue running this scheme in the future, and it sounds like so far at least that's what Day wants to do, what do they need to do personnel wise to be able to do it better? Is this, you need better corners who can play that press man like they did last year? Is that you need more of a pass rush where they were really missing the Chase Young to get the ball out of the quarterback's hand faster? Like, what do they need personnel wise, or to be able to make this a more effective defense?
Yeah, all the above. So, one of the critiques of Pete Carroll schemes in the NFL is, the old saying is it works great when you have corners who can press and bail, like a Richard Sherman, a deep middle of the field safety like an Earl Thomas, and you have a legit pass rush. And so they need all those things. I mean, the biggest thing is corner play, because in both those coverages, the corners are responsible vertically. And so, if you can't cover people in man coverage, you're just going to be in trouble. So that's where they need to start. But, I think having all those things, and then, we could talk about ways that they could adjust the scheme within as well.
Yeah, well, my next question was going to be about the coaching, about the scheme. And I mean, there are reports that, including on Buckeye Scoop, one of our insiders reporting Greg Mattison may be headed elsewhere next year, potentially to the NFL. If he does leave, whether retirement or taking another job somewhere, what kind of coach should they be targeting to replace him if they want to keep running the scheme, or how do they adjust the scheme next year?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, again, if you're going to play a Pete Carroll-like scheme, you should probably go get a coach that's coached under Pete Carroll, like a Jeff Hafley, or a Pete Carroll, protege, like Jeff Hafley did with the 49ers, someone who knows the ins and outs of how you adjust coverages, like we were talking about in that DaVonta Smith example, because it's always been a little strange, to me at least, that the day brought in Kerry Combs, who, has coached a lot of places, but never coached in this style of defense, and then asked him to implement it. I'm sure Kerry, not questioning that his ability to do so per se, but it would certainly seem to be helpful to have someone who knows the ins and outs of that defensive scheme.
Yeah, I'm always reminded of Rich Rod going to Michigan, and he always played 3-3-5 at West Virginia, and then he didn't bring Jeff Castile, his defensive coordinator from West Virginia. So he went to Michigan, wanted to run a 3-3-5, and brought in someone who'd never run a 3-3-5, and it actually didn't go all that well, because turns out football is kind of complicated. How about that? One last thing before we let you go. Cannot let you go without getting your thoughts on Urban Meyer taking the Jacksonville Jaguars job. Tony Gurdon and I did a whole show on Buckeye Weekly on that on Thursday. I mean, it seems like he's set up for some decent success with the top overall pick, a ton of cap space. How do you think, his scheme? I mean, you talked a little bit about, this is not necessarily going to be a quarterback run first offense like you normally think of Urban Meyer in college. How do you think he will translate to the pros?
I mean, that's what I'm fascinated to see with the quarterback run game, because if there's one thing he has done throughout his career, it's run the quarterback. And, his big thing, which he's harped on TV for the last 2 years, is equating numbers. And that's always been his easiest way to do it. I could see him maybe trying to make up for some of that by relying more on RPOs. I was actually kind of surprised, 2 years ago, that they didn't use more RPOs when they had Dwayne Haskins. But that's one way to do it. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, I'm assuming he will be the first pick, has a lot of experience both in RPOs and replays. But it'll be fascinating to see. I mean, I would think that he would want to get people with NFL experience to help him sort of transition.
Yeah, that's going to be a very, very interesting one to watch. Ohio State fans, I think, are going to be nervously watching as Urban fills his coaching staff. And, will he or won't he with Mark Pantoni or Mickey Marotti or any number of other Ohio State staffers, Corey Dennis, Greg Mattison that was one of the possibilities. Greg Mattison may move to the Jaguars under Urban. So yeah, that's going to be something that Ohio State fans are going to want to watch. We also have a whole bunch of really interesting decisions coming up in terms of Ohio State players staying or leaving. Will they turn pro? Will they come back for another year? We've had some really interesting news sort of breaking on our Ask the Insiders board this week about names that I had completely written off as absolutely positively going to the NFL that might be coming back now all of a sudden. And that would sure change the shape of the 2021 football season for Ohio State if they do. Some or all of those guys do come back. So if you are interested in finding out what the heck I'm talking about, or learning more about what that 2021 Ohio State season might look like, might be a good time to join BuckeyeScoop.com. We are heading into, you think, oh, it's the offseason, there's nothing going on. There is a ton going on right now. This is between the NFL decisions, National Signing Day coming up, Ohio State in on one of the top 5 players in the entire nation. He can be making his decision relatively soon at a position where Ohio State could sure use another top 5 kind of player. And also the transfer portal. Man, oh man, is it going to be an interesting few months in the transfer portal as Ohio State looks to maybe, some of those places we were just talking about, Ohio State potentially trying to upgrade their roster. That might be new guys coming in through the transfer portal, not just true freshmen. So lots of really interesting stuff coming up, and you can check it all out at BuckeyeScoop.com. Our insiders are already working overtime to keep you apprised of everything that's going on, happening, what they're hearing, what they're seeing, and what to expect during the what should be a fascinating offseason for Ohio State. Also, make sure you check out all of our great podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever fine podcasts are sold. You can find them. Just search Buckeye Scoop. You can find all of our great shows there. You can subscribe right there. Also, leave us a 5-star rating and review while you're at it. That'll do it for today. That'll do it for this week. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you Monday.